What's up, everybody? I am your host, Shaan Donn, and this is the Stupid Fans Club. Welcome to the club. Please subscribe if you're not already subscribed. We are exclusively on YouTube. I will eventually expand back out to audio podcasts, but for now, we'll just be on YouTube. And be sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram. Do post little clips here and there from the show. So please make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. Really love the support, and I appreciate everyone who's supporting thus far. I've only been doing it for a few weeks, and have already been blown away by the support. So let's keep it up. I'll make sure I keep the videos and the content coming. Also gonna switch things up again this week. Everything is fluid, so bear with us. But this will be an exclusively college football related episode. So there's so much that generally happens in the college football week because there's just a ton of teams and we're getting into the thick of it. So just a lot to talk about and a lot to try to fit into one episode. So we're going to have our college football dedicated episodes, going to have some NBA dedicated episodes, NFL, and we'll do it like that. So a lot of fun stuff in store. Again, this will be exclusively about college football. So if you're waiting for the NFL stuff, that'll be on the next video. And we'll jump into that. Incredible week of college football as usual. It seems to never fail us. It's always something shocking or big that happens week by week. So we're going to do some recaps of the games this weekend, the big games this weekend. And we'll jump into the updated top 25 and look at some previews into next week. And that'll do it for us. But ton of big games, and there is, especially for me, only one place to start, and that is the good old Ohio State versus Oregon game. Oregon ended up winning the game 32-31. Oh my goodness. If you watched last week, or if you saw the clip, you saw my thoughts about this game. I made the Stupid Fans Club debut hot take for the Ohio State versus Oregon game, and here's what I said. And listen, I haven't had a hot take like this. This is a sizzling take. This is a McDonald's hot cake hot take. Ohio State is going to expose Oregon when they play. I do not see it in Oregon at all. I don't trust Dylan Gabriel all the way. And Ohio State's defense is solid, and their offense is unbelievable for me. They score a lot of points, and they are another one. They're a team where they can kind of get off to these slow starts, maybe let a team hang in there longer than they should, but they seem to always find it, and good luck after that. I don't think it's going to be close. I think Ohio State handles Oregon big time, and I think Oregon will be graced with the ranking that they should be after that. So, you know what's so funny about that clip? You post so much content, and some things get more engagement than others, and of course, that video, out of all of the videos I've posted, all of the predictions I've made that turned out to be true, that was my most successful video, got the most engagement. I'm like, out of all the videos I've posted so far, that's the one that all the people see. But I absolutely love it. Listen, there's no other way to start this episode other than the Ohio State versus Oregon game. And it has to start with a public apology to Oregon. I apologize. I was not familiar with your game. Listen, I apologize to Oregon, the program, the fans, the city of Portland, Washington. They're up there somewhere. Like, apologize. The Mighty Ducks. Anybody who has a duck as a pet. If you live by a lake that has ducks, I apologize. Like, everybody gets an apology. I was obviously wrong. And here's the thing. Even if Ohio State had pulled it off, I still would have been wrong because my point was that I thought Ohio State was going to make quick work of Oregon. Oregon just was not at all on my radar for a team that was going to be able to compete. I thought they were grossly overranked. And they showed, hey, buddy, no, we're not. And we'll get to the polls later. They moved up in the polls, and I have no argument for it. Let's get into the game. Back and forth game all the way through. These teams were clearly evenly matched, and I think the spread was about like 3.5 points or something like that. Close, maybe less, 2 points, something. But it lived up to that. I didn't think it would go that way at all. I was just watching it, super surprised by Oregon's physicality, like in their run game, of course, but I didn't expect them to kind of just out physical Ohio State. And again, my thought is like, I know that again, I wasn't unaware of Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, Dylan Gabriel. I knew they had marquee players, but Ohio State, if you know anything about them, they have the team. They have a team built for a championship, and so I just thought that they could match up with them in every position, and I thought they were more elite in every position. And man, Oregon showed it from the beginning. My goodness, Denzel Burke for Ohio State, he had no chance against Evan Stewart. I mean, against anybody really, he looked mismatched out there. And mind you, Denzel Burke is him. He is a great cover corner. And he looked like all out of sorts. It seemed like every big play was happening on him deep down the field. And I mentioned Oregon getting exposed in that game before the game. I thought they were going to get exposed. They were ranked number 3 coming into the game, and I didn't feel like they truly were. And I thought Ohio State would show that. And if we're talking about anybody getting exposed, it's Ohio State's defense. Again, this team was made to be a national championship contender, which they still are. Let's not get crazy. But their defense was being compared to the Michigan defense of last year. Like, nobody goes through that defense, and Oregon was going toe to toe. They didn't seem overmatched. Oregon scored kind of when they wanted. Ohio State would score. Oregon would come back down and score. So again, if we're talking about exposures here, it might have been Ohio State's defense, and not saying they still don't have a good defense, but that was a good team they went up against, and they had all they could handle. And so Ohio State went up 14-6 early in the game. So I'm starting to think, I think that Ohio State scored first, and then 14-6 game, and I'm thinking this is where, here it goes, guys. Here's what I was talking about. Ohio State is getting ready to pull away. But every time Ohio State would have a big drive, a big possession and score, Oregon would come right back down and score. And again, Evan Stewart had a huge game, showed out. Jordan James, incredible, absolutely incredible that game. I mean, Ohio State's defense had no answer for him. He got whatever he wanted. Felt like he was getting 7 to 10 yards on every rush. And Oregon just never folded under pressure. Again, they just completely showed that we're big dogs too. And man, what a game. What a game. And of course, at the very end of the game, Will Howard, the final play, he ran out of time. I'm sitting there watching the game and, knowing what I think he snapped it with like 6 seconds left or something like that. And he's looking around, and I'm thinking of, you got to go quick. Like, you got to immediately throw it with only 6 seconds, no timeout, or 1 timeout left. And so he's kind of sitting back there in the pocket, looking, and I'm like, okay. So, and then he starts to run, and then he keeps running. I'm like, wait, you got to get down. You don't have that much time. Oh, and eventually he ran out of time. And I think it might have been the play before that where you could tell Ohio State thought the clock was going to stop, but it kept running. I guess maybe I forgot what happened, a penalty, something happened, but the clock kept running, and then they, just ended up not having enough time there. But absolutely incredible game, and completely impressed by Oregon's performance. Even Dylan Gabriel, no turnovers, 2 touchdowns. He was playing amazing. He was putting every throw right on the spot. I mean, the Oregon just looked outstanding. Round of applause for Oregon. The other thing to note for people, because I know they have no idea. If you look behind me, it's 2 posters of Georgia, one of Braves. I am a Georgia fan. Like I wasn't. People may think I was rooting against Oregon. I really didn't care. I'm a Georgia fan. Whoever beats Ohio State and Oregon doesn't make any difference to me. So I am not anti-Oregon. I just didn't think they would match up with Ohio State well, and they proved me wrong, and I absolutely love it. But man, what a game again. What's next for these teams? Let's start with Ohio State. It actually gets pretty interesting from here in the Big Ten. So they do have a bye week coming up this week, and then they go and play Nebraska. That will be a home game. We all know Nebraska is no scrub this year. They have a really good team and a darn good quarterback with Dylan Raiola. So that will be an interesting game. Kind of another team that has an offense equipped to score. So, I don't know that they have the weapons of Oregon, but they have a good team. So we'll see how Ohio State matches up from there. And then after that, they have at Penn State. And historically, again, Penn State has been in that lower tier. It's like, Penn State they're a good football team, but they can't beat the big dogs like Ohio State or Michigan in the Big Ten. So we'll see. And Penn State had a big game we'll get to later, but it gets pretty interesting over the next couple of weeks for Ohio State. So I think we will see, and we'll learn a lot about just how good they are. But that is what's coming up for Ohio State. And we have Oregon, a short week for Oregon. They go to Purdue to play the Boilermakers. That is a Friday night game, and that'll be interesting. Purdue just had a close game, a very close game, overtime game, I believe, and loss to Illinois 50-49, I believe. And if you don't know anything about Purdue, they are 1-5 now, I think. Not a very good team, and Illinois is ranked. They beat Nebraska in Nebraska, so they are a pretty good team. You didn't really see that coming, but heck of a game by Purdue. Listen, I'm done with I have no Oregon hot takes this week. No hot takes for Oregon. But I do say be careful. Be careful. Short week, going on the road, huge statement win. And listen, I'm the one who had the video and the hot take and all of that. I had mine recorded and easy to find, pinned on my TikTok profile. Please go follow. But I wasn't in the minority. And so you just had a big Oregon versus the world win, close win, primetime game, and it can sneak up on you because we saw, again, Oregon is not Illinois. They're much better. But that game can sneak up on you. You can sleep on that game. And again, it's not out of character for Oregon to play lackluster against lower competition. Which brings me to my point with Oregon. You showed up against Ohio State, and after those first 2 weeks, you looked better. But still, no one really believed that you were going to beat Ohio State. So this has me questioning, are you all playing down to your competition? Because why was this such a shock? Like, at the end of the day, if you looked at the rankings, it was a number 2 versus number 3 team. It should have been this is anybody's game. But it wasn't perceived like that before the game. And so there's a reason for that. And it's because it's coming off as, like, after that performance of Ohio State, which I wasn't expecting, it makes it seem like y'all just may play down to your competition. Again, putting all of this into context, you go in there and just think you're the big boys on the block and treat Purdue as an afterthought, you're going to end up in a much closer game than you want to be. And all of that can come down to shreds after your big win against Ohio State if you don't come out there and treat them with some respect. But I do think Oregon may just be playing down to their competition and showed a glimpse of how good they can really be this week against Ohio State. But yeah, at Purdue for Oregon coming up, and then the week after that they have Illinois, and then the week after that they have Michigan. So it gets really, really good. We are in conference play now, and big win against Ohio State, but they're gonna definitely have some challenges coming up, and we'll see how they play out. But overall, a fantastic game for Ohio State versus Oregon, and I think it surpassed the hype. I definitely do. It was a fun watch, and congrats to Oregon. And again, apologies to everybody from Oregon. Go Ducks. Let's talk about this Penn State USC game. That was an absolute thriller there. And I knew coming into this game that this was going to be a better game than it appeared on paper. Again, you got the super high ranked Penn State at like 4 or wherever they were, and unranked USC. But if you've watched USC this year, you know that they are better than an unranked team. And almost all of their losses have been by one possession. I think all of their losses have been by one possession. Very, very close games. And, that was going to be a battle for Penn State, especially on the road. And so it actually started off pretty shaky. Penn State actually did get off to a good start. They had a touchdown on their first drive, but because of a offensive pass interference call, that was called back, and then they ended up having to settle for a field goal. And from there, USC just turned it on. It was 20-6 in the first half. Woody Marks was having a field day. He had a big game, 20 carries for 111 yards. And it was pretty much all USC first half. They were moving the ball as they wanted. And it didn't seem like Penn State really had a response for them. It wasn't until the third quarter, second half, where the momentum started to shift there for the game and for Penn State. Tyler Warren, player of the game. Tyler Warren, I believe, is at tight end, and he had 17 catches for 224 yards. Unheard of. That is like Brock Bowers type of numbers, and a little less athletic, but that's who he looked like out there. He dominated the game and was was the Drew Aller's favorite target. He also had two. You've probably seen him on the replays. He caught two ridiculous trick play passes, one for a huge gain, one for a touchdown. I remember seeing the trick play, and I was what is actually happening here? It looks so, it's like slowly developing. It looked almost elementary, and it was just a toss up 50-50 ball, and it was like, what the heck? But yeah, he had a field day out there. Tyler Warren was absolutely unstoppable. Drew Aller, he had I don't even know how you describe that game. He threw for three interceptions, but I guess he had a very resilient game. Threw three interceptions, but was just able to bounce back. It was kind of like a next play mentality, and made the big plays when they really needed them. So I guess you could say it was a good game for Drew Aller. He was able to respond and deal with some adversity there. And then USC ends up going into overtime after back and forth second half, and Penn State kind of closes in on the USC ends up missing the field goal in OT, and then Penn State makes theirs, and that was the ball game there. USC, I think, may be the best worst team in college football. They are 3-3 and could very easily be 6-0. We remember they start the year off with a huge game against LSU and end up beating LSU in a very tight, close game. They were a broken tackle away from beating Michigan. And then last week they were upset, I guess, by Minnesota on the road in a tough game there. And then they lose by a field goal here in OT to the now number 3 team in the country. And so, I mean, they have been in all of these games. No team, it's always a tough task to beat them, but it seems more often than not they are coming up short. Still a good team. I think they can give teams some scare, or scare some high-ranked teams here, because they are tough to beat. But I think with 3 losses now, it's probably going to be a fight for bowl season. Just too many losses, falling too short too many times, and but again, very easily could be a 6-0 undefeated team here. So we'll see how USC finishes off. And then what's next for Penn State? They have Ohio State in a couple of weeks. That's going to be a huge game. And it's really about figuring out, Penn State, are you for real this year? Do you mean it? Are you good and you really mean it? I think it was a big start against USC. I heard someone say these are the types of games that we've seen Penn State lose in the past. So I think that's what it's going to come down to. And we'll learn a lot against Ohio State here coming up. But great game against Penn State and USC. I knew that game would be closer than some may think, and it proved to be true. Moving on to South Carolina versus Alabama. Oh, man, I can't wait to talk about this one. So here is the question here. Was the game a game that Alabama closed, or was it a gift from South Carolina? If you watch the game, it was controlled in the beginning by Alabama. They went up 14-0, and it looked like they were hitting on all cylinders. South Carolina couldn't get their offense going, looked super out of sync. Alabama's defense was making big stops, and their offense was getting what they wanted. And then suddenly there was a shift. They closed the half much better defensively after looking like inferior at the start of the game. And then they end up getting a safety. It has some good offensive drives that led to a touchdown and a field goal. And you look up and it's a 14-12 football game. So you're saying, okay, South Carolina's back in this. They're stopping Alabama now, and they're able to move the ball a little better. So it seemed to be going South Carolina's way, momentum going South Carolina's way going into the half. And then the start of the second half was pretty much controlled by South Carolina. And here is what my takeaway was from the game. South Carolina, I felt like, got every break that you could get. And the problem was they just couldn't capitalize on them. They were put in position to win that game several times, or to really take control of that game to make it really difficult for Alabama. And they just couldn't capitalize on it. And I think that's when you're upset minded, that is the difference from having a week like Vandy did against Alabama and then having a week like South Carolina did. Because Alabama at the end of the day is still a good team and has a lot of firepower. So you kind of anticipate them like, hey guys, at some point they're going to make a run. The thing that I talked about last week with Vanderbilt was every time Alabama would make a run, Vandy would respond. Vandy was right there. Oh, you kind of similar to this Oregon-Ohio State game. It was 14-6 early in that game. Ohio State said, no. We're gonna make this a close game. We're not gonna let you run off. And so South Carolina kept being in position to pull away or really make it difficult for Alabama. The first one comes to mind. They had a chance to go up 2 scores in the fourth quarter. It was about 12 minutes or so left. They had the ball. They're up 19-14, and Sellers, quarterback for South Carolina, is just doing a simple RPO. And they fumble the exchange. You see this happen from time to time with that RPO. They can't really decide if they want to pull it from the running back or if they want to take it themselves. And when he pulled it, he lost control of the football. Alabama gets the ball back on their side of the field and make them pay. That was the first, that just shifted the momentum because, again, South Carolina was moving that football against Alabama. You're up by 5 with a chance to go up 2 scores in the fourth quarter. Man, you really like where you are if you're able to do that. But instead, they fumble. Alabama scores. They get the ball back, and they end up missing a field goal with a chance to go up by 2 with 6 minutes left. Alabama, they get the ball, go right back down the field and score a touchdown. That was another opportunity. Another one at the very end, deep pass to the end zone to Nick Harbor in the corner that they called incomplete, but on review, they saw he got his foot down. Boom. South Carolina got the touchdown they needed. Get the 2-point conversion. This is a tie football game in the fourth quarter. What happens? South Carolina can't convert on the 2-point conversion. And then they get the onside kick. They get the onside kick recovery. But what really hurt them there was that deflected pass that ended up being caught by the offensive lineman, who then takes off running and just kills clock. They have no timeouts. And again, now you're just throwing a Hail Mary that they couldn't even get to the end zone. And that ended the game. So South Carolina had every chance you could ask for. They were put into position to take the leads, pull away, make it so hard for Alabama, but they just couldn't finish like they needed to, and that ultimately cost them. So, was it an Alabama close or a South Carolina gift? Man, I really have to say a South Carolina gift. And I don't want to discredit them because, again, they still had to go and score in these positions. And so they showed that they can put it together, but, man, they just don't. I think the fear has been removed for Alabama. They don't look like big, bad Nick Saban Alabama anymore. They look very beatable. Again, you come from a 28-point lead to Georgia taking the lead and almost winning that game. to then the next week getting upset by Vanderbilt to again almost getting upset by South Carolina at home. And so it's kind of like this is a team that could be 3-3 right now. They have looked shaky week by week. Again, I keep saying it, that defense is not the same. They are very vulnerable, especially in that secondary. And man, scary times for Alabama coming up. They have a brutal schedule. It's like, again, you're in these close games with Vandy, end up losing to them, and then almost to South Carolina. Oh yeah, and then we have our toughest road game of the year next week against Tennessee. I mean, they are putting themselves in a tough position, and again, you get that loss there to Vandy already, and you still got Tennessee, and then week after that you got Missouri, and then I think you get a bye week maybe, and then you got LSU. I mean, it's a brutal schedule coming up for Alabama, and they're struggling with teams that we aren't expecting. And so, they're going to have to get a hold there, but definitely scary times for Alabama. We'll see how they pull through. We're going to find out we are in the smack dab middle of the season here. So we are about to find out a lot about these teams. We're going to find out a lot about these teams. We're in conference play. Can't hide. It's no more cupcake teams until, some at the end of the year, but, can't hide anymore. It's mano y mano. Show me who are the top 12 teams in the country. So that's Alabama. And then for South Carolina, it speaks to what I mentioned about these mid-tier teams last week. Here's the clip. These little 3-2, 2-2, middle of the road, we're not great, but we're not terrible. Those type of teams, Arkansas, like these teams give these undefeated big dogs so much trouble because, again, one, I think part of it may be you may just come out and play the name of the team instead of playing the team itself in that specific game. Arkansas, again, is another one of those programs who haven't been competitive at all. They're an afterthought in the SEC. And when you see them come out and they're competitive and they're hanging with you and you can't really pull away and their defense is better than you thought. Kentucky, another great example. We saw what they did against Ole Miss. We saw what they almost did against Georgia. These teams are gritty. They come out with this aggression. It's, again, that hunter versus the hunted mentality. There it is. I mean, and I called that, hey, is this Vandy? I called that could be a challenging game there for Alabama. And I mentioned South Carolina could be a sneaky team. I've watched these teams and I'm like, you watch Alabama and you're like, man, they have some exposure there on defense. And sure enough, they're in another week where they have to pull away and pull a rabbit out the hat to win the game. And so South Carolina is one of those teams. If you come in there looking at their record, thinking like, oh, they're just a mediocre team. Okay. Okay. Because again, man, these defenses, especially in the SEC, are brutal. I mean, South Carolina's edge rushers, they are no joke. And so it just proves it. And I think, South Carolina offensively, they have some challenges. Obviously, they can't score as well or, with these more elite teams or more elite offenses. They are more so of a team that wants to run the football, run the option. But, you play around with these teams, they can put you down. Please don't play their records. Please don't play their records, especially in the SEC. So nonetheless, another exciting game there with South Carolina versus Alabama. And Alabama comes out victorious. And boom, right back at them. Another SEC game, Florida versus Tennessee. That was a thriller there. This was another game where early on it looked a little shaky for the favorites. Tennessee starts off the drive and rhythm, but boom, another RPO, try to hand it off, couldn't get it, turnover. And Florida ends up getting a field goal from it, going all the way down the field, and they are up 3-0. And it was pretty much a stalemate like that for the rest of the half. The defenses were on both sides were kind of playing out of their minds. None of the offenses could kind of crack the code, which was a little surprising for Tennessee, but we'll get into that. Florida had several drives where they got into the red zone, but something just ended up happening every time. It was a turnover or end up having to settle for a field goal or penalty. It seemed like they kept getting into the red zone and then just couldn't found a way not to walk away with any points. But Florida ends up going up 10-0 halfway through the third quarter, and that's where you could feel the uneasiness there. Again, Florida is a 3-2 team. You're like, oh, Tennessee, highly ranked, Nico, they're going to handle them. It was feeling a little uneasy and feeling like we may get another upset. And please listen, folks. Tennessee has to be one of the most difficult places to play in. It feels like the state of Tennessee fills that stadium up. Like, it is ridiculous how electric it is out there, especially for those night games. So it is no fault, especially for a struggling Florida team. That is no easy feat to just go in there and be up 10-0 in that type of hostile environment. So again, it was feeling uneasy for Tennessee there. And then on the touchdown pass to go up 10-0, Graham Mertz ends up getting hurt, and he is out for the rest of the game. DJ Lagway ends up taking over. And unfortunately, we found out today that Graham Mertz is hurt or will be out for the remainder of the season. So big loss for Florida there. They did kind of, run a 2-quarterback system, but this will be DJ Lagway's team moving forward. And he's shown some glimpses of being phenomenal. And other than Texas, they have, this should be a pretty seamless transition here. To the point where some people were calling for him to start anyway. And so, yeah, they should be pretty comfortable with that. But we'll see. I think they had some back and forth with who would be the starter, but maybe this helps Lagway settle in and knowing, it's no one over his shoulder anymore. And we'll see if he can take control and kind of finish out the season strong for Florida. But big loss for Florida there. But Tennessee ends up responding from there. It's like that touchdown flipped the switch for Tennessee. It's kind of like the meme of the game where you go down a little too much and then you're like, all right, let me sit up in my seat. That's what Tennessee did, and they got going on offense. Ended up taking the lead 17-10. And then with seconds left, Florida goes on a drive. DJ Lagway throws a touchdown to tie the game there at the very end, which ended up sending this into OT. Huge clutch play for Florida and DJ Lagway there. Exactly, what you want to see now, knowing that, hey, this is going to be our quarterback moving forward. And again, and that Tennessee defense is no joke themselves on the road. I mean, and to just be thrown into like, hey, you gotta take us all the way here. Huge for Florida and Lagway. So they end up tying it. It goes into OT. And then another one, Florida got the ball, but missed their field goal. Couldn't hit the field goal. And Tennessee ends up getting the ball, but they kind of made a statement there. They had the ball and they end up scoring a touchdown. Like you could tell they were looking to close this out. They didn't want this to come down to a field goal. They didn't even want to play around with it. and they end up punching it in there at the end to win it in OT. But another thriller in the SEC, a big win for Tennessee, but a good showing for Florida. Florida is another one of those teams that are mid-tier team. Not expecting a lot from them this year. I think they have one of, if not I think they may have the hardest schedule in the country. And a great showing for them. Again, I don't know how many people know this, but it is extremely hard to play in Tennessee, especially at night. I mean, they are on fire out there, and they have a team to get behind and be excited about this year. So very, very good for both teams, I guess. Tennessee, able to pull it out, but good showing for Florida, because it's probably not a college football playoff year for you guys anyway. But good to see that they fought and were able to compete and go toe to toe with that Tennessee team. Takeaways for Tennessee: their defense is legit. They showed that. They can be an elite defense here in the SEC, and they definitely get energized by that crowd. That's a team you don't want to have to play in Tennessee. I keep saying it, but they get it's like they just get shot in the arm from that crowd, and they just get amped up in even more, and it's even more difficult to get past them. But really good defense, but it seems like we may have discovered that their offense may not be as high flying as we thought. Last week lost, upset by Arkansas 19-14. Again, 2 touchdowns that game. And then this game ended up winning 23-17 in OT. And then it was a 3-0 first half. So, Nico is great, but obviously still has some learning to do, still has some growing to do. But coming out in the season, I think they were scoring like 70, something like you were putting up crazy numbers and just looked unstoppable. But now we kind of see like maybe need to pump our brakes there. Offense may not be as good, but still a good offense, and got a strong defense. So that's my takeaway for Tennessee. And then, like I said, with Florida, they just continue to battle. Their schedule isn't going to get any easier. They have the hardest one in the country. And seems like they found their identity, and now they, by default, have found their quarterback, who's going to, who shows some glimpses there, some clutch play in a very hostile environment. So, shoot, you could do it in Tennessee, you could do it anywhere. So they should have a no fear, nothing to lose mentality to play with, which makes them even more dangerous. And they are a different team, I feel like, than we saw against Miami. And so they have some confidence now, and they're gonna break some teams' hearts, some teams who may have something to play for. So be careful, keep your eye on Florida.
Let's talk Kansas State versus Colorado. 31-28 win for Kansas State. Another 10:30 game. I think it was the Tennessee-Florida game went into OT, so it was a late transition to getting to that game. But man, it was kind of, like I said, Colorado, or say every week, they are must-see TV, and I was very interested in seeing this matchup. To set the stage, it was kind of like you got a ranked team with Kansas State, and then you got Colorado, who's playing well and playing better than a lot of people thought. And so I was curious to see how they matched up. Like, we saw that they got completely destroyed by Nebraska earlier in the season, but then they upset UCF. And so it's just kind of like, okay, like, and not, 4-1 football team. Let's see how they match up. We can't, tough to say how good or bad Colorado is right now. And Kansas State offense kind of took a little bit to get going there. But they eventually were able to pull away with a 2-possession lead, 21-7. DJ Giddens was the player of the game for Kansas State. Colorado's defense had no answer for him. I mean, he was running amok on that field, and he just ran angry. He ran like he was pissed off, and it was like every play he didn't seem like much of a talker and much of a showboater. He would just run the football angrily and then get up and go back into the huddle. It was like just a dominant performance from him. He really controlled the game and helped lead Kansas State to that win. 25 rushes for 182 yards, just dominant. One of the shockers and letdowns really was Travis Hunter getting hurt in the middle of the game. I believe they said he hurt his shoulder and he was unable to return. And that kind of just hurt the any momentum at that point for Colorado. And you start seeing Kansas State extend that lead to that two possession lead, and it was you were wondering, like, is this getting ready to get ugly? But in Colorado fashion, they make a furious comeback and end up taking the lead late in the fourth quarter to go up 31-28 here. Unbelievable comeback from Colorado. The thing with Colorado is their offensive line, man. It feels like they run a lot, and partly because they just don't trust their running game. They don't have a solid running game to kind of take some of that pressure off of Shedeur. And so he's having to drop back so much, which makes it a bit easier for defenses to just know, like, hey, we're gonna rush you. And so he just gets a lot of pressure on him, which makes it so difficult for them to put together drives. But when they do, they do. And you saw they were able to come all the way back and take the lead there in the fourth quarter. And it was like, oh my goodness, is this going to be another or upset win from Colorado? But man, Kansas State, just too good. They get the ball right back and score in 3 plays. 50-yard touchdown pass to Jace Brown, who was just another one who was unstoppable all night. I felt like that's where you started to see the Travis Hunter effect hurting Colorado. Again, it's just such a big player to lose because he plays on both sides. So you're losing your best DB and your best receiver. And Jace Brown just had a field day. He had 6 receptions for 121 yards and had that bomb touchdown to kind of end up putting it away for Kansas State. So that was pretty deflating there for Colorado. They did still have time, but they were just unable to get in a field goal range. Too much pressure on Shedeur. And obviously that offensive line is still an issue for Colorado. I believe he was sacked 6 times in the game. So tough loss there for Colorado. But I do think they keep showing that, like, we're a team that you got to beat and you got to play a full 4 quarters against us. You let us hang around, we will come back. And, they're a competitive team. So they still have some big games, some tough games on their schedule, but kind of everybody keeps bracing for impact, I feel like, with Colorado, especially after their showing against Nebraska. And I think it kind of all started back with Oregon in that Oregon game last year, where they just got completely manhandled up there and showed that they aren't even in the stratosphere yet of a team like Oregon. So everyone's like, oh, a ranked team, are they going to expose? But Colorado is hanging in there. And again, a solid defense. So hopefully they can get Travis Hunter back. I haven't heard any updates, but that's something they're definitely going to need. And then for Kansas State, what's next? It's they kind of played as expected. They're a pretty good team, but I think that 18 spot is kind of right where they are. I think they're appropriately ranked. But a dynamic team. They got a good quarterback with Avery Johnson. obviously have an incredible running back with DJ Giddens, and a great receiver there with Jace Brown. So I think they are a dangerous team, but maybe not elite just yet. But great game. Another must see TV matchup there with Colorado, and we'll see how they continue to play. And then we got the Texas versus Oklahoma matchup. Texas destroys Oklahoma 34-3. This was not a game, folks. This was not a game. And mind you, this was a slow start for Texas. Texas came out a little rough. I think Quinn Ewers was missing some passes early, had that early interception. But simply put, I predicted this, and I was kind of waiting for something like this sooner with Oklahoma. They have a good defense, and so I think they will manage to be very similar to a team like Michigan. Like, they will manage to be in some games just because they have a strong defense and you can stumble into some points, especially with that defense. But with teams with as much firepower as Texas, that ain't gonna work, dog. It's just they're not gonna play with you. And I just felt like Oklahoma, as good as their defense was, they are offensively challenged right now, and they may actually have a good offense, but all of five of your starting wide receivers are hurt. Like, what happened? I like, that's just completely unheard of. So I just think like they have a very lackluster offense, and again, the more you go up in competition, I don't care how good that defense is. A good team, an elite team, is going to put up points, and that's who Texas is. It's the reason they're the number one team in the country. And so, really, not much to break down with that game. It was a complete blowout. And my question here is, how good is Texas? How good are they? Are they really the number one team in the country? Are they really unbeatable? I think Texas has been the most consistent team in the country by far. I personally think it's tough seeing anyone beating them. I think they can be in some close games, but it's gonna take a special performance there to beat that team. They are really, really good, and I think it's gonna be a team that has to have a really good defense to put pressure on Quinn Ewers, make him uncomfortable. Don't let him just sit back there all day in the pocket, just picking you apart. But I mean, from every level, they are elite. Obviously, the quarterback and his backup got the best backup in the country. Quintravian Wisner, he had a big game this week. Gunnar Helm, big plays from him. Isaiah Bond, of course. I mean, they have weapons at every level, and they can put points on you in bunches. And they are a scary team. Anybody who's in their way should be afraid, and they don't hesitate to assert their dominance against you. Sarkisian has instilled a confidence and a swagger to that Texas team, and boy, good luck. Good luck. What is next? Texas has Georgia next week, as we all know and have been talking about since before the season. And listen, I just recently had a show called Any Given Saturday. And so you can't discount any of these teams. But after Georgia, they have a pretty favorable schedule. After Georgia, they have at Vanderbilt, which we know. Can't discount Vanderbilt, but with all due respect, Texas is not Alabama. Florida coming up. Again, we talked about how challenging they can be, but very winnable game. Then at Arkansas, they can challenge you, but again, we're talking about Texas here. And then Kentucky, same thing. Um, and then they end the season off with a tough road matchup against Texas A&M. That should be very, very fun. But um, not anybody besides Georgia who just jumps off the page like, oh my goodness, maybe Texas A&M, because they have to go to Texas A&M and play them, and we all know how difficult it is to play there. But I'm not going to be surprised if they end the season undefeated. Like, I think they, as out of every team in the country, they are the true number one team. Like, kind of no questions. Like, I don't really have any concerns with them. Oh no, Quinn Ewers gets hurt. Okay. Arch Manning is coming in, and again, he's kind of untested. Not truly proven yet, but he can play. It's not like not giving this sigh of relief, like, oh, thank God Arch Manning is in the game. That's not what's happening. So, I don't know what the concern would be with Texas. They look super dangerous. For OU, again, like I said, they may be able to win some games against some inferior offenses with that defense, but I don't think they can compete long term with these elite teams. So we'll see. Um, that was Texas, Oklahoma, and moving into the team that Texas plays next week, UGA. UGA played Mississippi State this past weekend, and it was able to win 41-31. Where do I start with Georgia? And this one is a little more personal for me, of course, because I'm actually a Georgia fan. Every week I've been coming in here talking about Georgia keeps getting off to these slow starts. They keep getting off to these slow starts. Last week, I believe, is when against Auburn. That's when I thought about, like, for the first time, that's when I thought, like, maybe Georgia's offense isn't just coming out sluggish. Like, that maybe this is who Georgia is. And after the Mississippi State game, I think it's confirmed. Each week, my level of concern has gone up. And last week I was at urgency. I was like, Georgia needs to have some urgency here. This week, can truly say that I'm concerned, especially going into a game against the number one team in the country on the road. Georgia started this game off against Mississippi State with an interception. Opening drive, threw a pick. And Mississippi State scores 3-0. And I'm going to break this down because I know a lot of people will look and be like, man, Mississippi State scored all those points late. Georgia didn't care anymore. We were up 31-10, something crazy. But I'm going to break down why week by week has led me here to a level of I'm concerned about Georgia. We go down against Mississippi State 3-0. Again, Georgia is just displaying their inability to assert their dominance from the beginning of the game. I was talking to a friend of mine about this game, and we talked about the past teams of Alabama. We talk about a team like Texas, Ohio State, these elite teams on the top 5 and things like that, top 10 even. When they play inferior teams, they come out and make it clear you can't F with us. From the beginning. Texas is not about to play with you when you come UTSA 50. Oh, who we got on this? UAB, blah, blah, blah. We got Nobody Tech University 50. I'm not playing with you. Georgia plays these teams, and in the very beginning of the game, you can look on their sidelines. They're like, oh, we can play with Georgia. And I can even hear kind of the shock and how perplexed the commentators are, because some of these commentators, it's their first game against Georgia, and they have this aura around the name of Georgia, and so you're expecting a certain level of play. And just so I'm not pulling this out of my hat, the commentator at the end of the game was like, I still think there's another gear for Georgia to get to. Like there's just there's another gear there. Like when you watch them, you aren't like, oh man, they are a team to be reckoned with. And again, maybe it is Georgia is just playing down to their competition. Excuse me. Maybe we're just playing down to our competition. Maybe we just can't get up for these games unless it's a highly ranked team or whatever. But I don't even know if I can buy that, because you were down 28-0 to down 30-7 in the first half to Alabama. You were down 6-3 against Kentucky. And that's why I got to the conclusion of, oh, this is just who Georgia is. Like, we don't have a strong, confident offense. We are a old school car. You got to crank it up. We got to let it sit for Georgia has to get a few possessions under them before they like, all right, boom, boom, boom. Every single game, it comes out a little shaky. It's a 14-10 game in the third quarter against Auburn last week. It's a 13-10 ball game in the second quarter against the worst team, or one of the worst teams in the SEC, Mississippi State. 13-10 in the that's not happening with Texas, who we play next week. What are we doing? That is why I am at a level of concern. And again, I didn't rush to this. I gave Georgia every week. Let's see. I don't want to rush. We have the number one team on our schedule, or number one team in the country on our schedule next week. You've already lost to Alabama. If you lose this game, the narrative changes. Can Georgia beat good teams? Is Georgia even good? Like, why? Wait, what? That's when everybody's going to start look. Wait, why because we got saved by that second half comeback. When Georgia wanted to look like Georgia, they finally wanted to turn it on. But now you kind of look at Alabama and be like, they ain't even that good. They shot up to 1, and they are down to 7 within 2 weeks. And so now you're about to play a team who's about that. Ain't no second half y'all go down 28-0 against Texas in the first half. Y'all gonna lose 50-3. And so this is why I can't just kick back in my chair and say, oh, Georgia was up 31-10 and we finally turned it on. We don't accept what you wouldn't in a loss and a win. These slow starts come back to haunt you. You saw a preview of it against Kentucky. It's no coincidence. We beat Kentucky by 1 point, played very sluggish, got off to a super slow start, was losing to Kentucky, and then managed to pull away. Not even pull away, managed to pull it out. We won by a point. And then you get a bye week, and then you go down 28-0 against a more superior team. These slow starts will add up, and you will get exposed. Again, I said last week, the season comes down to what we do against Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. Out of those 4 teams, from what I've seen, I don't know who Georgia's going to beat. I can't say with confidence, oh, yeah, we're going to Ole Miss. We got them. I don't know. Tennessee. And again, if you strike out, you're not making the college football playoffs. You can't lose all 4 of your big games. And these are very losable games. Georgia has the third. I think it's Florida, Mississippi State, and Georgia. Florida and Mississippi State might be switched or something like that. It's not going to get any easier. We have to at some point figure it out and show that we're actually an elite team. And again, maybe it's like I mentioned with Oregon. Like, I didn't see that performance from Oregon happening. I thought they were going to get blown out by Ohio State. So maybe they come out and surprise me against Texas. But hot take alert. I had my hot take alert last week with Oregon. It was abysmal. But I'm not backing down, baby. We back the very next week. Another hot take. And this time it's personal. It's with my team, my Bulldogs. Next week may be the beginning of the end for Georgia. Again, I just talked about it. These slow starts are going to catch up with you. You cannot keep having these slow starts and just think you're going to waltz in against the number one team in the country and they're going to just let you take 2 quarters to turn it on. 13-10 in the second quarter against Mississippi State is a no go. Mississippi State was on that sideline believing they could beat Georgia. Auburn was on that sideline believing they could beat Georgia. Kentucky believes. Kentucky probably just feel like they ran out of time. What do you think Texas is getting ready to do that y'all playing like this? And again, let's just hope we're just playing down to our competition. And something happens and we show a better performance. But I don't care nothing about no 41-31 win against Mississippi State. Second half, our DBs looked like they were playing Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson of LSU and Joe Burrow. I mean, they had no chance in one-on-one coverage. This is Mississippi State. Why are we winning by 10 points? I hope. Does Texas play Mississippi? I don't even think they played them this year. I just want to show y'all the difference on why I'm this. Like, you would think we lost with how upset I am about it. I want to show y'all what Texas does to these teams that are inferior and what Georgia goes out there and does. And again, my hot take is, unless something changes, next week is the beginning of the end. Georgia might lose against all them Big Four teams that I talked about. And by the way, I'm not skipping over Florida. We got Florida still. They just almost beat Tennessee. Man, Georgia's offense still looks like we're trying to figure it out. It's still no standout receiver. On top of, we now have lost Kobe Young. Arian Smith catches the ball every blue moon. I mean, it is certainly a level of concern here. And again, I just think if nothing changes, which I feel like we have a big enough sample size. I've been waiting and holding off and reserving this thought, this concern for all these weeks. I've seen enough. Y'all are walking into a slow death against Texas if y'all come out there on that BS again. I'm telling you, that's just what it's going to be. It's going to be a mismatch if y'all come out there on that BS against Texas. I've watched Texas isn't going to play around with you. We saw what they did with Oklahoma. And they even got off to a slow start and ended up putting 34 on them, and Oklahoma scored 3 points. They're not going to let you hang around. We need to show that we can put these teams away so that we can compete with elite teams. If you can't put these inferior teams away, you're going to get embarrassed. This is a road game against the number one team in the country. And we over here winning by 10 points. Looking like we can't even match up with their receivers in the second. Man. To end it, the remaining schedule for Georgia is absolutely brutal. They have Texas. We get a much needed bye week again, our second one. And then we play Florida in the rivalry, which again, I'm concerned about. And then we have at Ole Miss, who is now dropped in the rankings, but I'm I'm not putting them away. And then we have Tennessee, same thing, like very very tough game. Oh yeah, and then we have what 5-2, 5-1 Georgia Tech to end the season. The most challenging. First of all, Georgia Tech challenged us last year. I don't know how many people know that. It was a close game last year. Um, and they're even better this year. And oh, by the way, now Georgia seems like they've gotten worse and have no offensive identity. Man, the start of next week can be the beginning of the end for Georgia if nothing changes here. And nobody sees it. It's like nobody is alarmed just yet, but we'll see. So I obviously don't want this to happen, but I can't ignore the signs. So we'll see. The week 8 top 25 review here. A lot has changed here in the rankings. Oregon now jumps up to number 2. They jumped up one spot. They were number 3. And that's the thing, guys. That was what it was. That's really what I was saying. Oregon isn't number 3. They're number 2. Y'all, it went over your heads. It's your fault. It's your fault. Ohio State drops from 2 to 4 after losing it, and I like that a lot. I thought Penn State had a big win, so I thought they should go up in the rankings. And Ohio State lost by 1 point. No need to get out of control and drop them to 17 and think that Oregon proved that they're a good team. Ohio State lost to a good team. And so still a top 5 team and, a very, very appropriate ranking there. And then we talked about Penn State, big win at USC. They go up to 4 here. And then Alabama, surprisingly, stays at 7 after their scare against South Carolina. But Tennessee drops 3 spots. They go from 8 to 11 after their scare against Florida. I thought that was interesting. I didn't really understand that, but that was one of the big changes from the previous week. And then LSU takes a big leap up to 8 after their big win against Ole Miss. And Ole Miss just dropped dramatically after losing that game. They are now 18th in the rankings, 2 losses, and that's a bit of a disappointment there for Ole Miss. I think they can still fight their way back up. Still a big game against Georgia left, but tough drop there and tough loss. It was a close game down to the wire. End up losing Trey Harris, which I'm not sure how long he'll be out either. But I thought it was a competitive game, tough SEC game. They fell short, but kind of free fall there in the rankings. And again, I think it's that they're kind of showing how they feel about these 2 losses. Like they'll let one slide if it's a good team and tough close game, but you lose 2, you're gonna pay. That was the big movement there in the top 25 of going into week 8. And then of course we have the previews of week 8. Obviously the Georgia Texas game is the one to circle, the biggest one of the week. And then Alabama, big challenge against Tennessee at Tennessee. Boy, oh boy, that's going to be a good game there. And then I am curious to see Colorado again, how they respond after that loss, going up against a mid-tier Arizona team. Obviously, they have Teteroa McMillan, who's going to be tough. Is Travis Hunter going to be back? How are they going to perform on the road? Going to be very interesting there to see their response. I thought from the beginning Colorado was pulling for a bowl game, so it's the road to six wins. They're two away, and it's their schedule is very tough. So you got to get as many as you can, and we've seen them lose out. So not taking anything for granted here. They're gonna have to scrap for these last two wins at least to be bowl eligible. So good game there, and then LSU at Arkansas. That should be another big one, a challenge for LSU. Again, I feel like LSU is in a tough game every single week. And then Michigan at Illinois, 24 versus 22. Illinois had a big scare against Purdue this past week, so that'll be interesting to see how they respond and how they match up with that Michigan defense. And then can Michigan hang on, in the top 25? And then Notre Dame at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is not a team to sleep on at all. That's going to be a tough game for Notre Dame, but Notre Dame has some tough gutted out wins. So we'll see how they do on the road there in that matchup. And those were the matchups for me to circle in this upcoming week. Another exciting weekend of football. Great games. Again, Oregon proved me wrong. They are clearly a top tier team, but like I said, don't sleep on Purdue. Got to make sure you secure that win and don't have that hangover going into next week. And so a lot of close games, some OT games, some near upsets. So we'll see. But big one, obviously, the circle coming into week 8 will be that Georgia Texas. A lot on the line here, a lot more on the line for Georgia. And again, we'll see if something changes. And that is the show for this college football week, folks. I will be back with NFL show as well. And still got to break down the Arthur Beterbiev and Bivol fight. So again, splitting these up to make for some more focused episodes. But we will be back. I appreciate you. Again, if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube. And we'll see you next week.